As humans, we are continually making decisions, either actively choosing which way to go or even deciding to defer a decision. In business, that's what we're paid for, making decisions to advance the cause we are charged with. Further, while we can make decisions on our own, in business there is most often a need to have others involved in the decision-making process, as we are not able to effect intended outcomes of those decisions alone, independently. We need two things then: an ability to build alignment around the nature, scope, and intent of a business decision, and a process to make a decision that can be implemented successfully. This becomes even more critical when the decision to be made is part of a transformation of the organization. And in this day and age, transformation is becoming increasingly more the rule than the exception. So that's what this brief video is all about: building alignment and making decisions, especially in an environment of transformation. There are many models around to help us with this task, some simplistic and others very sophisticated, or at least complicated, and they all have some features in common. For example, they all start with some statement of what decision or a set of decisions we need to make. This focuses the ensuing dialogue, and it relates to the old adage that a problem well stated is a problem half solved. Another common trait is some step in which the participants involved in making the decision generate and assess options. Correspondingly, there's a trait in all the models in which the participants choose a solution and then launch action. The model described in this video shares those traits and incorporates some nuances that I find through experience to be particularly powerful and at the same time easy to comprehend and carry out. Keeping in mind that this model can be used by an individual faced with making a decision, it is even more powerful when it is used by a group or a team to move forward on a decision. The process is designed to build alignment along the way so the participants in the decision-making process can advance confidently and collaboratively. For that reason, this description will focus on the decision-making aspect. We call this model the Pentacle path, and you can get a sense of how it gets its name as we step through the process. As with the other models, the first move is to determine and state what decision or set of decisions we need to make. I find it useful to frame this statement as a question, being as clear and as specific as possible. This subtly changes a statement like, "How do we introduce bring your own device into the organization?" to "How do we ensure we gain the greatest benefit of implementing bring your own device and fully mitigate the associated anticipated and unforeseeable risks?" The main difference between this approach and a decision definition statement is where the creative energy goes after that step is completed. When the statement is a descriptive sentence, I often sense the participants perceiving the statement as a problem to be solved and feel the energy in the room pressing down on those involved as they grapple with the challenges embodied in the statement. When it's stated as a question, the energy in the room rises to explore possible answers to the question. The participants tend to be more engaged and more animated. Framing the question is not a trivial step. Recently, I facilitated a session with 3 senior executives to address a particularly nasty strategic challenge. It took us over an hour and a half to formulate the question. Once we had the question in hand, it was remarkably straightforward to complete the rest of the steps and produce a potent and compelling strategy and action agenda. From here, there are 5 distinct activities taken in sequence the first time around. In each case, the activities focus on the framed question. Again, common with other decision-making models, there are steps that require largely divergent thinking and other steps that require mostly convergent thinking. These need to be kept as distinct and separate discussions, with, by and large, the divergent discussion preceding the convergent one. The need for the separation has to do with the orientation of the participants in the room. Half of them have a tendency towards generating ideas, and if left to their own devices, many would continue to generate a lot of ideas without ever settling on any one of them. The other half of the room, as soon as they see the question, will tend to leap to the elements of the solution, typically reflecting known approaches or answers, not much creativity or original thought. Divergent thinking without convergent thinking generates no solution. Convergent thinking without divergent thinking generates suboptimal solutions. The first activity in the divergent thinking process, step 2 in the overall process, is getting to know what we know. That is, having the participants share everything they know about the question, whether that be based on exhaustive quantitative analysis or personal subjective observation. Considering the posed question stated earlier, some may concentrate on the nature of the changes to the business processes and how much of a change they represent, and others might focus on how able and willing staff are to adopt the new processes. The results of this activity is a rich tapestry of multiple perspectives, building a bond of shared understanding across the group. When I facilitate this process, I take into account the three major styles of participating. Some of us want to get our thoughts in order before we share them. Others of us prefer to dive in with some initial ideas, then feed off the ideas others put on the table. And still others just start talking. It's as if they need to get the physical mouths working in order to get the brain engaged. All three styles are valid ways of participating and are to be honored, even the third model. To ensure everyone has equal opportunity to contribute, however, I normally ask everyone to take 2 or 3 minutes to write down what they know about the subject matter of the question before sharing their thoughts. That tends to level the playing field, as the saying goes. The expressed thoughts are then recorded visibly on flip charts, a large whiteboard, or a computer projected on a large screen. Once we reach the point where we think we've got most of the items on the table, we move to the next step in the process, exploring the possibilities. As we move between steps 2 and 3, we metaphorically close a screen door so that we can concentrate exclusively on exploring possibilities. Later on in the discussion, a member of the group might think of another piece of information to be considered in the getting to know what we know step. The group can then look at this data through the screen door and consciously choose to let it in or not. When exploring the possibilities, there are a number of techniques available in the public domain to support the generation of ideas. Based on the nature of the questions, there will be some techniques that are more appropriate than others. For some thoughts on this dimension, take a look at the companion video to this one on dealing with ideas, or do some web searches on some of the ones mentioned on this slide. The major challenge for each participant in this activity is to acknowledge and suspend judgment. It is important not to have any constraints on the generation of possibilities. We will do that constraining later. This notion of suspending judgment means that we can set opinion aside for the moment, knowing that we can bring it into the discussion at a later stage. We're not losing it, we're just deferring it. This suspension of judgment allows for the free flow of ideas. Allowing ideas to flow freely results in more comprehensive exploration, and through combination of unusual or unworkable ideas, the group may generate some potentially powerful ideas to incorporate into the solution. It is now time to move from divergent thinking to convergent thinking and start making some choices. At this point, we move forward and close another screen door. In moving from exploring possibilities to making directional choices, the group needs to establish some criteria for making those choices. Many of those criteria will be inherent in the core question, if it is sufficiently comprehensive. It is always useful still to ask the question, are there any specific criteria that our choices need to satisfy? Further, which are mandatory and which are merely desirable? Here we are making strategic choices that will produce the results that will answer the question. I use the word strategic in the sense that it is defining the major whats that will be initiated, the hows come later. The key word in this phrase is directional. We cannot act or decide in the future, just as we cannot act or decide in the past. We can decide and act only in the present. In that light, we make a strategic choice. Essentially, what we're doing is pointing our feet in a particular direction and holding an intent in our minds to move in that direction. So any choice we make is, by definition, directional. The second activity in convergent thinking, and the fifth step in the process, is to initiate conditional action. Once again, every decision-making approach gets to action. And in pretty well all cases, these actions include what's to be done, who's to lead it or do it, and by when. The nuance here is in the word conditional. The Prussian general Karl von Clausewitz declared that strategy is good only until first contact with the enemy. The notion in initiating conditional action is that once we do something that will begin to answer the question, things undoubtedly will happen that will encourage us to reshape the action we have defined. It could be an unexpected pushback to our actions, or greater positive impact of the action than we had anticipated, or something emerging in the environment which makes the action either undoable or at least ineffective. This takes us to the importance of step number 6 in the process. Too often at this point, the decision makers in the exercise think that their work is done. The choices have been made, and now someone is on the nut to carry out the action that will create the outcomes that answer the question. Coming back to von Clausewitz's observation, we need to have a mechanism in place to ensure the directional choices we made and the conditional actions we initiated remain relevant and effective. So, one of the last things the assembled decision makers need to establish is a review mechanism that will work for them. It may include regular reviews to keep everybody in the loop, as well as emergency sessions when things appear to be going off the rails. With the continuing dialogue vehicle in place, the decision makers reconnect at some point and re-enter the Pentacle path process. This time around, however, they don't necessarily need to follow the steps in order. While they might start with sharing the events that occurred since the last meeting, they might move directly from there to adjust the directional choices. Or they might jump right into exploring more possibilities, or might merely adjust the action plan. It doesn't matter the sequence or the focus. What is important is that it makes sense to the assembled decision makers. Now, since the entire group of participants has signed off at each stage of the process, there will be clear alignment with every element. The intent embodied in the question, the collective understanding of what we know around the question, the possibilities for a solution, the directional choices, and the action plan. Powerful stuff, a set of decisions that the decision-making team actively supports. So that's all there is to it. If this approach appeals to you, I encourage you to make it your own and adjust it in whatever way you see fit. Just remember some of the principles on which this particular model was built. First, framing the decision or set of decisions to be made as a question results in the creative energy flowing more freely. Second, divergent thinking gets more options on the table. Convergent thinking gets decisions on the table. Third, allowing everyone to share what they know builds a common understanding of the challenge as well as a pact to create a solution. Fourth, choices are, by definition, directional. And fifth, defined actions are, by definition, conditional. Finally, it's not done till it's done. Keep the dialogue flowing until it is. We wish you early, decisive, and continued success in moving your team forward with this model. If you have any suggestions to make this alignment and decision-making process work even better, we welcome your contributions, and you can reach me at this email address.